So Alex is fresh off a 3-day stint in Japan, Brian.
I
That's
heard.
why he was, and WhatsApp doesn't work in Japan, it turns out. So Alex was invisible for the last 3 days. And we were like, where is he? Where's Alex? Has he left the podcast?
Yeah, now WhatsApp does work. I also got the iPhone 17 Pro upgrade. So I never got WhatsApp connected. So I didn't see any of your messages while I was in Japan. It was nice. I was just really felt like I was so far away from everything.
Alex, do you have a report from Japan? You were there,
Yeah.
I assume, for gaming or some
Yeah,
sort
it was a gaming event. We were like therefore it was set up by one of our investors, but it was also the beginning of the Tokyo Game Show, which together with Gamescom in Germany is like the big kind of video game event. It's incredible. Like I've been to Japan before, but never for video games. Just the scale of that industry in Japan and just how seriously people take it, and being there when there's an event where all that industry congregates.
Did you see people driving around Tokyo in go-karts with Mario outfits
Oh,
on?
yeah.
I didn't. I heard about that. I didn't. It's a big city though. 37 million people. It's like nearly as big as California, isn't it? Like, isn't it that big?
Yeah.
It's bigger than Regina.
It's bigger than Regina. No, it was great. Incredible numbers coming from China. China remains so. I think this is a media story. If you can let me
Articulate it.
Yeah, articulate it, or also just let myself talk about video games, which I know like is frowned upon on this podcast, talking about video games.
4 out of 5 listeners don't want you talking about video games.
Yeah, it's
Well,
411. Okay. We'll give you until 414.
All right.
Hurry up, Alex.
For the 20%, there's an American company called Valve that does something called Steam, which is the largest game store in the world. And it mostly runs on PCs, but also exists on macOS, but it's mostly a PC play. And it's also
one of the preferred platform of Antifa.
Well, I'm sure you can link a lot of those folks to some game that they might have downloaded on Steam. Everybody who's playing video game downloads them on Steam, basically. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty small company, sub 300 employees, privately owned. It's an American company that's doing great in China. It does great business in China. It is not messed with. And for a software company, that's unheard of. And I was interested to hear how, especially independent kind of video games do in China, because when you release your game in China, the rule of thumb is you should reduce your cost by 3x. So if your game is $15, $20, let's say $15, your game in China is $5. Even with that, if it does as well in China proportionally as it does everywhere else, if it does as well in China as you expect it to, it is 40% of your revenue. China is this gigantic gaming market, so much so that the Chinese government has had to put regulation in place to, stop people from overplaying, it seems. But yeah, it's really interesting. It's really interesting how big some of these markets are, but especially China via, an American e-store, and they get 30% of everything. It's an incredible business. Incredible.
Wow.
What about culturally? I used to go to Japan every year. We had a joint venture there, and I miss it. It's the only thing I miss about my old job. I mean, working with the other people, but outside of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I miss John Soul. I like John. But I last was in Japan, literally right before the pandemic started. It was the Diamond Princess was there. I was like, this is nothing. Why are these people putting on masks? That didn't age well. I always loved Japan. What's your favorite part? I assume you liked it. What's your favorite part of only in Japan?
I mean, only in Japan. Everything. There's always talking to American people that went there for the first time and realized that nothing works in America. The amount of American people going, wait, why can't we have this? And why can't we? Wait, you mean the subway, and the train will take you everywhere, and there's the high-speed rail is blowing everyone's minds. I think part of it that always surprises me is just how so much of the way society works is norms. right? There isn't a lot of like policing of it, because everybody, they have no trash cans, yet people don't throw stuff away. They don't have gates in front of things, but the bathrooms don't have key, like, wow, imagine going into a Starbucks and you don't have to put a 4-pin code into a bathroom to use it. And it's all like norms based, and it's pretty interesting to see a
I
society.
like that you could smoke in the New York bar in the Park Hyatt. I thought that was civilized.
And yet smoking is really like frowned upon in the rest of the city. You don't see much smoking at all happening outside.
Really? There's a lot of smoking in Japan, I thought.
I mean, maybe it's new, and I thought so
no.
too,
So they have designated areas outside.
Designated area, that's right. And also vaping, the traditional vapes that you get in America, the Juul type thing, which are the liquid vapes, are actually illegal unless you have a prescription. And they all use these vapes where you put a hard cigarette stick in it that looks like a cigarette, and it tastes more like a cigarette.
Those are Euro hybrid vapes. They're also huge in the Middle East.
But everything. I mean, everything you expect from Japan, just like the service, the infrastructure,
clean garbage truck.
I don't. The thing is, I keep hearing it, and I kind of tend to believe it, like how absolutely fucked the economy is in Europe. And now absolutely
you never see it. You never see it.
Economy in Japan, and then I go there and I talk to people, and everybody seems to be having a pretty decent time. And meanwhile, here we're winning, and people complain more.
I'm like walking by a guy who's like twitching from like fentanyl like outside of my apartment, and then you go to Japan and it's like everything's spotless. I will say Japan is kind of like the Apple of countries for a bunch of different reasons. Like it's a full stack solution. And that allows them to have different things that don't work in other societies. There's trade-offs. They don't have as much.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're simplifying it.
And freedom.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're having fun here, but like every society and culture, works because of things that, they've been developing for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and you can't just carry things over. However, I do think we could have high-speed trains. Like every time I use one, I keep thinking like this would be such an accelerant for this country, to be able to go down to LA, or for you guys, to go up to, I don't know, Boston or Miami.
It was suggested, I'm at this offsite event I just gave a talk to, and IEEE Spectrum. They're the publication from the Engineering Association.
Oh, this is a
fucking humble brag there.
Yeah, like you got invited by some serious brainiacs.
Elon Musk wrote for that pub.
He did, 2009.
Really?
No, great group. But actually, it got brought up that like maybe if we give Tylenol to more mothers to be, that we would have high speed rail.
That's
I hadn't realized that Tylenol came up as a stand-in for acetaminophen, which you pointed out in your newsletter.
So this is what I want to talk about. Trump basically couldn't pronounce acetaminophen, which is a difficult word to pronounce. So he just went with the genericized Tylenol, and then he just kept repeating again and again and again, do not take Tylenol, do not take Tylenol, do not take Tylenol. And I wrote a little bit about it today because I really do think it's really interesting. The role of like the chief communications officer at companies is really fascinating with how you navigate the information space and all that we talk about here. Now, some of this is acute to Trump, but you look at like Tylenol. Now, when I was a kid, I remember Tylenol being able to muscle their way through remember the tampering that took place?
Yeah.
So Tylenol's in like 1982, some maniac tampered with Tylenol and killed a bunch of people. And it became like, we didn't have the internet. It became like a national like panic. And they were able to, go on 2020, sit down with Hugh Downs and Barbara Walters, calm the situation. J&J, and it became like was able to get through it. And it became a sort of case study with how you do crisis communications. Fast forward to now, very different environment. Particularly, I think we're seeing this in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk psychodrama continues. Starbucks has been caught up in this like multiple times. There was basically a fake meme going around that said that Starbucks would not let people put Charlie Kirk's name on cups when they were going in to order his favorite drink. And then, so they kind of swatted that away because it was untrue. But then they have something like 380,000 like baristas. Then one did, when someone ordered this, put like your racist favorite drink as the name on the cup. So of course, goes super viral, and very fraught situation for companies when it comes to how they handle communications in this kind of environment. And it's beyond marketing to me. It's beyond PR. I think communications is a different thing altogether.
Well, you highlighted this in what I think is maybe the podcast of the week. I don't follow that podcast. Is that Altman's brother that does that?
Yes.
It is. Okay, he sounds a little like him.
Can you reference it? I don't know what you guys are talking about.
What is the name of the podcast?
Remember, I was in Japan.
Right.
He's Jack Altman. It's called Uncapped with Jack Altman. It's a VC podcast. I'm not like a regular.
Lulu Cheng Maservi was on the podcast, and she's a communication expert. And she had a stint set where Coinbase and Substack and a couple other
I know her at Substack.
She is special, super articulate, really smart. I think she counsels founders on how to kind of engage in a sort of like, her whole pitch is how to get people cheering for you, essentially, right? How to find yourself in to kind of cast yourself as a character in a narrative where people want you to win and want your company to win. And so she's really great. It's a great podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly very powerful, but I think it's become, especially when you have, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 employees, I think the moment allows for any one of those to completely kind of destroy this narrative for at least a portion of the population that wants to see you fail, whichever side you're on, right? Like, I don't know what you do as kind of a communications expert today. Like, what happened with Disney and then what's happening now with Starbucks just shows that you can just be put into constantly impossible situations because it only has to happen once, right? Like, the social media allows you to turn one event into like a million different pieces of content. That's the issue we have.
That I think is true, but I think, what Lulu really advocates is this going direct playbook, right? That I think is like breezed by a lot of, venture capitalists like, and I think this really is centered in the tech industry, but it will spread to other industries. And it's basically, don't trust others to communicate your message. You are going to be the communicator of your message. Her thing is that every single founder has to be, you can't outsource, being the face and the spokesperson for your company. And I think you're seeing that spread. You think about Andrel and the guy Palmer Luckey, he's like an embodiment. And I'm sure, you're the number one recruiter for talent for your company. And it makes a ton of sense. And I think it gives you a lot of leverage when inevitably you do get pulled into these things. Because I think a challenge for a lot of companies is they're left scrambling with an old crisis playbook because they didn't do the work ahead of time to build their own sort of media platform in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's certainly Muskian and Trumpian, and whether you like the way they communicate or not. It's part of the times we live in, isn't it? Going direct.
100%. Disney is. Did
Bob Iger manage this one well? It seems like in the follow-up late night episode that Kimmel did a good job, that Disney ended up getting out of it, I think, better than we expected. What was your take on the Kimmel performance, Brian?
I'm less emotional now, Troy. I don't like to get emotional, but
are you referring to your reaction to?
I think you called it my rant. I believe at the magazine launch party, you called it my rant.
Okay, you mean when you were really upset about people smothering free speech?
Just the First Amendment, Troy. Just the First Amendment.
Yeah, I know.
But he doesn't have it. He's Canadian, so he doesn't have it.
Yeah, well, that and the third-party cookie are two things that I will absolutely tie myself to the railroad tracks for. No, I think I'm actually open to him like managing this from a corporate comms perspective. quite well because he was put in a tremendous bind. I mean, the reality is that Disney is a massive corporation with tons of interest. ESPN is in the midst of buying the NFL. He has a fiduciary responsibility. I don't think that Bob Iger really wants to roll over for Donald Trump or for anyone. I really don't believe that. It just does not match up with everything that I've ever read about the guy. I don't know him. But I think this is still, we'll see where this goes next. I mean, this is not going to stop because a lot of, it's funny because Kimmel came back on air and a lot of the sort of acolytes in the manosphere said, see, it had nothing to do with government pressure. And then immediately, of course, Trump comes on and puts more pressure on. He always like cuts off the people who go and try to put like some sort of distance like between like what he's doing and like, just be like, well, let's put some wiggle room in here. And then he just comes back. He's like, no, this is exactly what I'm doing. And so
Kimmel's performance was a 9 out of 10, I think.
Well, he had to. He did what he had to do.
He didn't appear to, he showed contrition and emotion. He subtly
without having to apologize.
Yeah, he went after Trump and Carr in the episode. It was funny and pointed. And
do you think he choked up? He genuinely choked up? Do you think he?
Yeah, I think he's a crier. He's been known to cry here and there. Okay. I think he gave Disney a plausible path. That they were, upset about what he said, that they were feeling the pressure from the affiliates, that they needed some time to kind of work through things. And I don't know, it felt like Disney kind of got out of it okay. It also showed, I suppose, that maybe the FCC's power is withering for sure because, broadcast licenses aren't worth what they were. And in this case, even though the affiliates cut off 20% of their distribution into some key markets, they had, to date, 15 million views on YouTube. There's a workaround now, People got to see it. Besides that, anybody that isn't old is watching, clips on YouTube anyway. They're not tuning in at 11:30.
Yeah.
No, and this did some records.
Yeah, well, this is a classic dead cat bounce for like late night TV. And this is a dying genre. And, leave it to Trump, who's like a creature of the past, to go after something that is probably going away on its own merits, right? I mean, the late night TV as a genre its past due date is like, it's gone sour at this point. I mean, we've talked about the uncanny valley of a lot of these formats. They don't have the singular place, obviously, in the culture that they once did. I thought Bill Simmons had an interesting take. He's friends with Kimmel, and he had worked on the show briefly. I forget how many years ago. I think before he went to ESPN. So he's obviously got a dog in this fight. But he made the point, and I thought it was interesting, that you don't need the platform necessarily. Like, I mean, obviously Jimmy Kimmel needs Disney, right, for his show. He's also the face of it. He hosts their upfronts and whatnot.
Oscars, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Now,
but
there is
what happened is that the show brand, right, the Kimmel Show, and the network brand, ABC, have become kind of akin to the magazine cover. They're not important from a media distribution perspective like they used to be, but they still have a kind of vestige of, or a veneer, like a prestige to them that still matters because...
With whom? With like advertising?
Well, I think that it can be an accelerant in, other distribution channels like YouTube. And it's a signifier that this is an important person or message, or... it's just like a magazine cover. It doesn't mean anything from a distribution perspective, but you were on the cover of Time. You made it to the cover. Still a thing.
I think that. I mean, is it like it's still something? Yeah, people still care about being on magazine covers, and I think the role. Troy and I were at a magazine launch party. I can't believe there's magazine launch parties in 2025.
Well, I mean, important that it was, underwritten by an investment bank, but yeah.
Okay. But still, you got to take what you can get. And, the role of a magazine, it was S's magazine. I will give them a little little shout out here. It's
Cool
an
guy,
F1.
hustler, total hustler.
I didn't get to talk to him. It's an F1. It's about the culture around like F1. To me, it's like you have all of these monocle of X brands that to me are starting. I'm doing a podcast next week in Paris with Tyler Brûlé from Monocle. So I'm going to ask him about these.
Nice one. On the rebooting show or something else?
It's on the rebooting show. No, he's actually going to sub in for both you and Alex.
Nice.
On People vs. Algorithm. We're doing it from the Monocle Cafe, which is very exciting for me.
Is Tyler Brûlé Canadian? I think he is.
He is a fellow. I'm going to ask him if he knows you.
Yeah, great. We all know each other.
Yeah. But I think of them all in that way. And maybe this is like sort of what you're talking about is like, the magazine itself is a signifier. I talked about this a little bit with the Spectrum folks. They're publishing magazines every month. And it's a signifier in some ways. Mm-hmm. And it's a differentiator. Its role as a distribution like mechanism for content is sort of gone, right? But it's interesting that as these publishers become more fully formed brands, right, that are expressed in many ways, that in some ways print still has a role. Late night TV, I guess, still has a role.
Yep.
Just different. Alex looks bored.
Yeah, he's bored. Let's move on.
I mean, I don't know.
Alex just had a wave of jet lag that hit him.
Yeah, no, I just
did you? By the way, did anyone fall asleep
for a bit?
Did anyone fall asleep like at the event you were at? Did you see anyone just like dead asleep? Because that is a Japanese thing that like I always
really?
I would be like speaking and there'd be a guy like dead asleep like front row.
It was video games. It's much too exciting.
People are hyped up.
What are we going to transition this conversation into to keep the momentum up, Brian?
I wanted to transition it into your little adventures, Troy, into a good racket. Because we've talked about rackets before on this, and we've mourned the demise of many of the great rackets of media. And really, you could argue media in the old days was just a series of rackets. But there are new rackets that always emerge. This is capitalism. There's ways to make money. There's shortcuts available. And you went down a bit of a rabbit hole of a digital racket.
Yeah. I mean, I always like to say, Brian, that every good business is a racket of some sort.
Yeah.
Right? Like sustainable, high margins is, I think, what, how you describe a good business. And that's a racket usually. Underneath of it, there's something going on.
Well, because otherwise the economy would close down that margin, right?
Yeah, right. So this one was kind of weird. I mean, I had been looking. I have noticed that, any business that operates a kind of online storefront that's dependent on finding new customers, there's a huge premium on the level of sophistication the team brings around performance marketing and all of the things around it, like not just media buying, but how you convince someone to spend money with you, how you sample the product, how you connect all your data sources up so you are doing a good job of managing your customer acquisition cost or CAC against the lifetime value of the customer, how you're measuring that accurately, how you're looking at retention and making sure that you get the most out of a customer, et cetera. Like I don't care whether it's a, telehealth company or a lifestyle retailer or, whatever it is, it's not like you have a storefront that you welcome people into or a giant organic promotional channel that you can use to sell your product or, you're selling through Walmart. If you're selling direct, you got to be really good at this stuff. And so I'm interested in it. And I'm also interested just in the math of the game, the mechanics of it. So someone had said to me, or I was looking at a business doing cognitive assessments. And so any business like that, you develop the product and then basically after that, the only cost of goods you have is your cost of acquiring a customer. So as long as you're making more money than it costs to acquire a customer, they're pure in that regard, right? Like you're looking at a kind of beautiful little mousetrap where you're trying to extract enough money to pay Google or pay Meta or pay whoever is bringing you customers. So a friend of mine sends me a link to something, I think this is age old, by the way, on the internet. It's not a new thing, to a Mensa IQ test. Mensa. And this is from a company called My IQ. So I took the bait. Everybody wants to know. It's kind of a good call out. Interestingly, in their promotion, they don't say how smart are you. They say how rare is your intelligence. Which means that, everybody's smart in the eyes of their mother, right? Like everybody can be smart. So they do that. And then I kind of nerded out on it and I deconstructed how they were bringing me in. And then I did the math on it to see how much money they could be making. And so I don't know if you want me to, I can describe how they play the game. I don't know, it's boring I think, for Alex.
I don't think it's, no, this is
Go ahead.
direct marketing. This is not boring.
Well, this is as pure as it gets. So the thing about online marketing is you can't ask people, like it's not like someone's handing you a coffee. You can't ask for the money up front. So you got to give them something first before they're going to give you the money. So what they do here is there's an ad. They get you in and the first question says, do you like solving complex problems? And you have 3 choices. Yes, no, I don't know, whatever. So you start there and then they take you into all these kind of quite graphic puzzles. And these puzzles are the questions that are, going to determine your IQ. So they tell you where you are in the process. There's a timer. You got to get it done at a certain time. So there's a little bit of kind of, personal competition. And there's 30 steps. The puzzles are fun. You take them all. You get to the end and you want to know how smart you are, right? I mean, it's a IQ test. And apparently, the results are scientific and yada, yada, yada. So you get to the end and they have some clever, language around why you should believe the results. But you can't get your IQ. You want your IQ. I mean, that's why you did it. And so the only way to get your IQ is to give them $1. Now, $1, everybody will do it for $1. Well, here's the hook. You don't realize it, but when you give them $1, first of all, they'll only give it to you. They only give you the results via email. So you have to put your email in. No biggie, right? You're going to get someone's going to tell you how smart you are. But what you don't really see is you're not just spending $1. You're signing up to a monthly subscription. It's like IQ SaaS. It's like $29 a month for a bunch of cognitive tools and tests that you can have access to, but you don't really see that. So anyway, once you go to get your IQ score, they start hitting you with the upsells. Do you want to buy $9.99, cognitive tests, or do you want to take these puzzles that you can do every day to make yourself smarter and all of this? And that's the racket. That is the racket in a nutshell. So acquire them with the ad, engage them with a free test, get the result for $1. That's the transaction. Upsell you to buy a bunch of things, capture your data with an email, and try to, and they do lots of really cool, subtle things. Like now that you've taken the test, they can say, hey, Troy, question 15 showed a rare level of insight. You were able to, your cognitive skills are very, very special as demonstrated by your ability to answer question 15. So they do kind of tactics like that. I put the numbers together. I can put this in the email if anybody wants them. I put the numbers in we'll send it out in the email this week. But I said, what if you spend $1 million in media? And what if your, cost per click, which is the sort of lingua franca of this business, right, was 50 cents? And what if 10% of people, got through the test, or 5% actually? And what if 10% of those only, so that's a combined rate of 0.5% when you times 5 by 10, what if they, paid up, right? And what if of those, 5% bought the stupid $15 upsell for the cognitive tests? And what if only 20% forgot to cancel the subscription because they probably didn't know, right? So like 80% canceled, 20% stayed on. Well, as it turns out, if you spend $1 million, you probably lose $800,000 in media. Like you just wouldn't make your money back. But if you changed a bunch of those things, right, and you tweaked it so it was like 10% of people finished the test and 20% of those, paid the dollar, and they stayed on the subscription for, 2 months instead of 3 months, or sorry, 3 months instead of 2 months, and 30% of people did it. Anyway, the point is that if you make little changes all the way down the mousetrap, you could invest $1 million and make $1.5 million. And he did it really well. You could invest $1 million and make $5 million. And if you invested $10 million in media, you could make $50 million. So what's interesting about these companies is these people are extremely good at optimizing the initial media buy, the engagement, and then the harvesting. And the company itself, one of the funny things is that the tests are signed off by Dr. Sarah Chen. And Dr. Sarah Chen, as it turns out, because I went to find out, well, maybe she's on LinkedIn. I'll say hello. Dr. Sarah Chen apparently is one of the most popular fake names on the internet. And so there's like Reddit threads on who is Dr. Sarah Chen, this mysterious non-existent person. And then you ask around and you're like, well, who made this test? Who's the CEO of this company? And no one really knows except my dark arts kind of internet people are like, yeah, it's some Bulgarian guy in London. And, that's the game. But again, interesting to deconstruct and figure out the things you have to do to take someone who doesn't know who you are, get them to engage, and then figure out how to sell them something when there's no human being involved. And that's most of online commerce. And what I've seen, and the reason that it's interesting to me, is I've seen companies, like particularly recently because of an interest of mine and an investment I've been doing, is, well-meaning, highly credentialed medical people, right? Doctors and such, setting up online health businesses of some kind, whether it's like for, hormone replacement or weight loss or any number of different, biomarkers or any of these things. You get guys that are really good at the medical side, but don't understand the online distribution side, and they fail because you can't do it without those, without those skills, the skills of finding customers. And I think it's also applicable, Brian, to media, because the offer construction in media to the transaction is you getting bumped out of the way with a paywall, right? It's like, read this article. No, you can't. Here's a paywall. Pay the money. But that's actually not going to lead you to buying something very often. My observation is the only way that works for me is if I'm so frustrated because I get so many links from Bloomberg that eventually I just get frustrated and I'm like, okay, I'll buy it, right? But like for the most part, the media business, certainly the one that I worked in, the subscription capability around magazines was prehistoric. And even today, how we get people to buy a media product is just not very sophisticated. We put them up against the wall and say, no, you can't have this. And then look at this kind of page, you can pay $19 a month for it.
But isn't this because the media racket was an unsophisticated racket based on magic, not on math? Direct marketers, like I started covering internet businesses that were like crazy, like in like 2000, the dot-com era. And then when everything imploded, I wrote about direct marketing. And I was like, oh, I understand this. These guys are just math. Like they don't care, like direct mail guys, like it was all just math. It was all about optimization.
I would say it depends on the type of media. And there's a lot of lessons in this. In the magazine world, they gave away magazines at severely discounted prices because so much of the cash came from advertising. In the television world, people wanted television and they were sold by cable companies, and all the cable networks and broadcasters rode on the back of that, right? They weren't direct to consumer marketers. And then Netflix came along and they were actually pretty good at it.
But this is the famous like Mel Karmazin quote when he met Larry and Sergey and they debuted they showed him like what they were doing with Google. And John Battelle had this in the opening of his very good book, The Search. And he said to them, "You're fucking with the magic, boys."
Yeah.
And that's it's like, look, the internet rewards optimization, right? And I think the challenge I think you're touching on with the doctors is anything that can be optimized, unless you put brakes on it, it's going to be optimized into some disgusting place.
Pretty
You know
much.
what I mean? Like you end up in a horrible place, I feel like.
You end
And
up
I think,
selling, weight loss drugs to babies or something,
Well, I mean, I think, a lot of the...
Alex, a lot of this is in gaming, right?
Yeah,
Like
I mean, a lot of it
Oh,
came
yeah,
from...
huge in gaming.
I mean, a lot of this stuff just came from gaming and porn, right? Like all of these hacks, because I think you have some of the most innovative yet ruthless people looking into that stuff. And the thing I always found interesting is, I mean, gaming, it gets pretty, it's psychology, right? It's the psychology of like wants and needs and gambling and all of these things that are tying you into just one more thing, or like, we're going to string you in. So you then have some time investment in something and you're like, ugh, it's only $1 just to finish this thing. I thought would be free. It's incredibly misleading. Really dislike all this stuff. Stuff I always found interesting is that Apple can be so specific about what it allows you to do in its app, like down to the word, right? But a lot of these kind of dark patterns, and because these are all dark patterns, right? I think they put them in the same bucket as like hiding the close button on a thing that asks you to pay for the free app. Totally allowed, totally fine. They'll tell you like, you're here things here's a long list of things that you can and cannot do on an app, but it's incredibly easy to get misled by an official iOS app, let alone on the web. I mean, yeah, I find that this stuff is pretty despicable. I mean,
it's repulsive. It's repulsive, but it's also very admirable.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm sure. Yeah.
Well, don't hate the players, Alex.
I mean, this is the way the
players.
system. I personally like the sort of sweepstakes casinos, the services that get around any
Gambling
sort
laws.
of like gambling laws by creating some kind of like dual currency system. I don't fully understand all the mechanics, but there's always going to be, this is just how the internet works. There's always going to be ways to find a seam. And I think a lot of times, media has lost in that game. Like, I don't think that they're, as feral as they need to be to build internet businesses. Like I see, like
I'm reminded of this all the time, Brian, and I highlight it for a reason, because you can hate the game, but it's like the reason that Casper went bankrupt and Nectar sold for like $1 billion to $2 billion wasn't because Nectar made a nicer brand, and Casper had fancy shops in Soho and they did a great job building a brand. It was because Nectar did a far better job of optimizing their funnels and doing online selling, and it had nothing to do with the mattress. So, it really does determine winners and losers online. And I've seen, just a simple example, like I know a guy who sells a product online that has a $2,000 lifetime value, and he and his team will spend weeks and weeks optimizing the intricacies of conversion, which is what happens when you arrive on a landing page and all the ways that you need to reinforce the purchase decision process. Because if their conversion is higher than the next guy's conversion, they can spend more in acquisition and force the people out of the channel, right? They can own the first slug on Google. Right. So like this conversion mechanic is like, it's not just for scammers and, like the dark arts like edgelords. It's for all these online businesses.
I mean, we had a whole conversion team at Airbnb. I've sat through a lot of these meetings, and they're very
good at it.
sophisticated. They're very advanced, very sophisticated. Mm-hmm. You're asking people to make pretty big decisions around travel. But as always, I mean, I think if it's very hard to regulate because some of these things are so convoluted that I would worry that I would worry that with the internet becoming a harder place to make business, it just becomes like the ecosystem that emerges is just this like.
Yeah.
I mean, I find it pretty quaint the way like traditional media companies ask you to subscribe to get the thing. I guess that's not the way things usually
kind of
work.
nice.
No.
Well, actually, in the old days, the obsession when I was hanging out with you in San Francisco, Alex, the obsession in early days of Facebook was how to find and manufacture virality around network effects to create pass along between people to get them to sign up for services. It was a different type of acquisition. It was typically free, and it was about growing your customer base extremely quickly by like doing what Farmville did to get people to like share with their friends and connect the nodes on the internet. You know, it's always been a bit of a thing that the people that are good at had a huge advantage at.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was talking to a guy who's at like a magazine company who had left media and gone to work for one of those online gaming companies for a little while. And he was like, the sophistication there compared to media is just vastly different.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, you know, challenge and opportunity, I suppose we could say. I want to talk real quick about this idea of the New York Times building a super app. Our friend Dylan Byers, friend of the pod, is he a friend of the pod? He's a friend of the pod. We should have him on sometime. He had on Meredith Levien, the CEO of the New York Times. Meredith always gives a little bit of a frustrating interview. She's really good at what she does, which means that the interviews are never going to be super revealing because she's the CEO of a publicly traded company. But you got to read between the lines. That's fine. She's hitting all the talking points about direct connections. And, you know, they've got those activist investor 5 span that we talked about. And I do think that it is worth discussing whether the New York Times can build the sort of Netflix of quote unquote news. Now, the reality of the New York Times business is that it has a ceiling for its news product. And that's why it's been building this bundle. Okay. It is building a lifestyle product, really, with news, yes, as part of it and, you know, at the center of it, but it's not going to, they're at 11.8 million subscribers now. They want to get to 15 million by 2027. They need to get people who are subscribing for more than just news. So they've added The Athletic, they have gaming, they have food, they brought their audio into their app. They keep trying these spin-off apps, and then it just becomes in the regular app. They're next going to split out. They're going to add all their short form video into some kind of geekier TikTok like scroll, and it stopped marketing standalone news subscriptions altogether. So they got the recipes, they got the games, they got sports. I'm interested in your view, Troy, about whether, you know, how big can the Times get? Because it's by far the most successful news company out there, right? It's growing at about 10% a year, which is great in this market, honestly. But can it get to being like a massive consumer
it's a story that's been told a lot, and I think it gets as big as, you know, one thing they can't do is kind of depart from what is the kind of foundational point of view of the media brand. So if you're not a New York Times person or don't see yourself in that brand, I think, you know, you probably don't want the product. Having said that, what's amazing about these times is that the lines, you know, we talked about the media singularity a few weeks ago. The lines between media types have kind of disappeared. So the New York Times can be, you know, can appeal to people that want radio increasingly in their feed. I think you'll see it more and more. It's a video experience. It's a kind of, you know, lifestyle experience via games and cooking, as you pointed out. So I think that when you think about it as a multimedia kind of news and lifestyle application, it can be, you know, it can appeal to a lot of people that just don't want to read the paper. And as such, I think it can be enormous. And the other thing I thought was really important, and a comment that Meredith made that was, you know, certainly close to my heart, is that the thing that drives me craziest about kind of modern media in a digital age is how shitty the experience is. And I know this has been said a lot, right? But like, partly out of desperation that we had to layer a bunch of ads in it, partly that there was a kind of, original sin of online media is that the ad model sucked and it forced you to do two things at once. And, as a human being looking at an ad and looking at content, like all paths led to this is a really lousy experience. And I found that the practitioners didn't pay enough attention to that. So what that always did is played into the hands of the platforms that made good experiences first and foremost, right? And they managed advertising appropriately, and the apps were fast and they worked and they prioritized the consumer above the money and all that stuff. The thing that Meredith said is we have an enormous tech team of 1,000 people. And the thing I will give them immense credit for is I love using their app. It works great. The New York Times apps just works. It's as close as you get in media, I guess, next to Netflix, of an app that's on par with what comes out of a sophisticated platform company. And I think that's going to enable them to get closer to that subscriber goal. But Brian, if you're sick of talking about the New York Times, which I guess I might be, the transition here is one that is news today, but a recognition that in the sort of democratic world of online distribution where, people have to seek you out and everybody has their own distribution channel, really building distribution into your product is so important. And I thought what OpenAI did today was really smart.
What did they do?
They launched a new product today called Pulse. And Pulse is something that I've kind of wanted just to make on my own, which is something that goes out on your behalf, gathers information, knows what you're paywalled to, knows what's in your email and what's in your calendar, and comes back dutifully, every morning and gives you the goods. It comes back to you. It's an asynchronous product. So it gathers and gathers and gathers. I guess you would call it an agent, and it comes back and it delivers, the goods that are, depending on how many of your services you've authenticated with. Like I've authenticated OpenAI or ChatGPT with my Gmail account, with my calendar, and with my Google Drive. Now it's that much more personal. Yeah. And it'll come back and I'll say, listen, every morning I want news on media and gaming and, this sports team. And it'll come back and it gives it to you in cards. And they've only opened it up to pro users. That's the $200 a month thing, but they'll open it up more broadly soon. But
does it work?
I don't know. It's just came out today. I haven't had time to mess with it. But
until it actually works, I'm not going to get too hot and bothered about it.
But a couple of things. Just look at where this is going. It's gonna work.
It's gonna work. I mean, if
it's gonna work.
It's not a hard thing to do.
But look at what's happening now. You don't go there; they come to you. And now, the more data you put in, the better the product is that you get out. Now it knows your interests. Now it's a little media gathering machine that works on your behalf. I mean, this is really powerful shit, right? Now it delivers the newspaper to you.
If and when it works, yeah. Well, I mean, they tried agents. Does anyone, okay, we've got 3 people in here. I'll say no. Have any of you used an agent that has actually worked? Have you ever used AI in an agentic capacity in which it has actually done a task on your behalf?
I mean, I think doing it, we're talking here. No, it's a no, because that stuff is really complicated. And I think
I don't even know what the question is. Does that mean
it's
my flight for you?
It's just to do some agentic action, which, okay, let's define it. And I would say it's defined by having the computer do something for you that isn't just information.
Book a flight.
Right.
Book a table.
Book a flight. Quit it.
But we're not talking about booking a flight here. Here's the thing. I think
the Silicon Valley people keep telling me.
I know.
Book flights for me.
I know, Brian.
I didn't make it up.
Here's the thing, though, Brian. What Troy is talking about will have huge impact on media. The book a flight thing is not required.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. And I think part of a lot of the conversation with AI, as we've said before, is just like where it's like pie in the sky shit, right? Like where the agent stuff is what you need to really pitch to the enterprise that humans are going to be replaced. But in this case, the set of capabilities that you have today, right? I already asked my ChatGPT to go and fetch the news for me. I do agentic type tasks. Now that it's connected to my Gmail, I just had it export all the trips I did this summer, and it exported all the data. This is all like, I mean, is it agentic? It's not going to book me a flight, but it's definitely doing stuff where it's connecting the dots.
So what is the implications of this? Because I mean, I got an email from a reader.
The implications is it takes up more and more of your spectrum, more and more of your attention. Right?
You can be hidden behind a paywall and it will still take over your interface. Does that make sense?
Yes, but but for like publishers, you're still having the paid relationship. But this is a typical thing of technology, is layering the interface on top, and so you're basically going
either free or paid, correct? Right. If it authenticates all my paid sources, even better, great. And now it's going to go out and it's going to read the FT for me and just give me the shit I'm interested in. And if later I want to go back and browse the FT because it's Saturday morning and that's what I like to do, then I'll do that. I'm not saying it's the only use case, but suddenly, you know,
I like it.
ChatGPT can come out and get my attention and do a bunch of the work that I otherwise would have done. And that's, you know, that's something that's just going to soak up more and more attention.
I mean, so who gets screwed? That's where I go.
I think news shows get screwed. I listen. There are a lot
news.
Yeah, all of us.
I mean, all of us get impacted somehow. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
I had a reader. Let me just finish. I had a reader. He's like, I don't know if this is good news or bad news, but I took your last like 14 newsletters. I've been behind, and I fed it into like GPT-5 and got this like 400 word like, you know, update on what you've been writing about, and it was enough.
Right. You know what? But you know what? Is that, I think if you embrace this type of stuff, right, it's kind of amazing that people can catch up, right? I think it's actually, that's a huge opportunity.
Mr. Silver Lining over there. They caught up.
I mean, I think, I mean, I've always been somebody that liked getting my information like that, you know, and I think if you're now getting a clipping service, but also if you're running a little newsletter, you can recontextualize stuff for people. Like companies like Substack are not particularly great at innovation, but I think if I subscribe to a newsletter and I had a little catch me up button and it send me the first newsletter that says, here's what you've missed, here's what you need to know about this publisher, that would be great. Because a lot of this stuff, I think there's a moat, there's a learning curve to understand the content that you're reading, et cetera. Like what is that person covering? And I think that could be interesting. These are the types of products we're not really seeing yet, but I think are going to be super interesting.
Well, in related sort of product news, Granola updated. Granola's becoming an interesting app. So you probably know Granola because it's a browser extension that records your Zoom calls for you.
Yeah, it's creepy.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm using it right now.
There you go. And it's also an app that can record a conversation that you have, or, your mother could use it when she went to the doctor, and it outputs these incredible summaries. AI is really good at that. And now Granola groups all of your recorded information by the people that said it, like the individuals, the people, the companies who shared it with you. And it can also record phone calls, Alex, which is pretty useful. If Apple was smart, they would be all over these use cases. I think the privacy thing stops them from doing it too aggressively, but it's 100%. Super useful. Super useful.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think Apple is somewhat, shackled by their privacy stuff. The thing is, they'll be able to do a lot of this stuff, if not all, using just their onboard compute, right? So that could be really interesting. Because that's all how many times a day, like the transformation side of this technology is so close. And it's kind of annoying that they keep pitching us all of these, the agentic stuff, which might take a long time to work. I see that as self-driving cars, right? But like here we are, the good comparison for that is like, we were so excited. Everybody was looking at self-driving cars. But meanwhile, we got auto braking, we got, like all this kind of collision detection stuff, right? That was 10 years before automatic driving, automatic vehicles.
Braking has saved me, and I'm ashamed to admit it, from no fewer than 10 accidents because I was texting when I was driving.
And I think we're at this level of
driving
all the time. Yeah, it doesn't matter anymore because it'll break for you.
If you could,
I don't think I have that. I don't think I have that in my Altima.
If you could talk to your AI instead of having to look at your phone, that would be even better. But I think we're at the stage now that there's so many cool, interesting products that you could build, and it's just not there yet because I think the focus is on some other stuff.
Well,
is this good product? Is this a segue into good product? Okay.
I think we should start doing a bad product, maybe like inkjet printers and bank fraud, or like my broken espresso machine.
Or your IQ test.
Or my
espresso machines are always bad products.
I have a Marzocco. It's a beautiful product, but it's.
But leaking. I think that they are a product that a lot of probably men, particularly, buy and then don't use that as much.
Well, that's wrong in my household because we use it every day. So the new AirPods are cool. Apple was going to sell 1 billion of those things, the new AirPods. I've also been testing out the translation thing, but I'm not going to use AirPods as a good product. That's ridiculous. I do
my
like
Serbian in-laws are coming in a couple of weeks, so I can try them.
People's Bar in Manhattan, which is like you have to know someone to get in, but it's not a club with dues. I like this place, People's. It's nice.
Yeah, there's a guy out front. He was friendly enough.
Yeah, right. He was friendly, and you don't have to be like a card-carrying member, but if you know like the dude that's an investor, like you can get in.
Right.
Yeah.
So
anyone who wants to go to
that's
People's,
not my good product.
Just say AB sent you and you can get in.
Right. I have had in the last 2 days I don't even know what the right way to characterize the cuisine is. Mediterranean is the obvious catch-all, but if you call it Israeli food, people are like, you mean Palestinian food? I don't need like a side order of culture wars with my, hummus. But there's a chain, you'll know it, Brian, because I think it's in Miami, called Motek, Motek. I went to
Oh, yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
That's Israeli.
It's Israeli. Here's what we're talking about, okay? We're talking about like, crispy artichoke, harissa spare ribs, crispy cauliflower, Moroccan cigars, in addition to this, the basics like shawarma, lamb and chicken, just delicious. The best.
Food of my youth.
Oh my God. Spicy Greek feta. What a great dish.
So, okay. I mean, we're keeping these as relevant as always, right? To everyone. So if you're in Madison,
Wisconsin, it just opened the Manhattan location on Broadway.
And it's a chain.
Well, there's about 6 of them.
Everything is a chain. Everything is a chain. You cannot have a successful restaurant that stays in a single location.
See, Alex, that's the difference between you and Brian. He sees the narrative.
Yeah.
You can't. Name a successful restaurant that has only one location.
No, I get that. Name a chain that hasn't turned to shit.
Well, blame capitalism for that and Troy's IQ,
you know what?
direct marketing.
Travel the world and capitalism is doing just fine. Starbucks in Japan is delightful.
Oh, the roastery is amazing there.
Yeah.
Amazing. It is
good
truly
in Shanghai.
like a temple.
It's really good in Shanghai too.
Go to a McDonald's in Austria. I mean, I think if Americans saw like how brands were treating them here compared to the way they're treating everyone else, I mean, that could be a new outrage. Like, why is the French McDonald's so much nicer than a McDonald's that we get here?
Do you think we just have like low expectations or what?
I mean, I think all these companies know what they're doing, and I think that they will push the consumers to wherever they think they can be pushed. I think American consumers deserve better, like they do. Yeah. Why is it? Why is that? I really wish I knew. I really want to talk to like people in these corporations, and why is the local product from an American company worse than the product you get abroad?
Well, that we are, speaking of Japan, to bring it back in, they're opening Japanese 7-Elevens here, which is kind of ridiculous. It's like 7-Eleven in Japan is tremendous, right? It's
Yes,
got all kinds of like you can eat 3 meals a day in 7-Eleven, and like
They're
honestly,
everywhere.
they're great meals. Like you will not be upset. And
I had a rice ball for my flight.
yes, they're bringing. So it's a licensing thing to Japan, and then they're bringing the Japanese version of an American convenience store back to America.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really interesting. I think that's going to be great. I don't know. I think we're going to see a lot of these kind of brands like Starbucks falter because I think they're just not providing the consumer product that they need.
Luckin is coming. There's multiple Luckins opening within like 2 blocks of me in New York.
And it's not trying to be like fancier. It's actually it's pared back, right? It understands
$3
what the consumers need.
$3 with the app.
Yeah.
Starbucks is going for a $6 medium coffee and trying to make me order it in Italian. Like, no.
Yeah. That used to work. No longer.
You speak English here. Okay. That's
another
good.
Great,
I got to catch a train. I got to get to Poughkeepsie. By the way, Hudson Valley. Hudson Valley is a good product. Like you wouldn't know that you're only like a couple hours north of New York City. Hudson Valley is like lovely.
I mean,
Big
you
fan.
could have
Nice
gone
little
there instead of Florida if you weren't a tax evader.
It's got efficiency. I'm at the Mohonk Mountain House. It's got a lot of like The Shining kind of vibes. Stephen King was known to eat Thanksgiving dinner here with his family. I don't know if it impacted his choices with The Shining, but yeah, there's a lot of ghost vibes in this place.
That's it for this episode of People vs. Algorithms, where each week we uncover patterns shaping media, culture, and technology. Big thanks, as always, to our producer, Vanya Arsenov. She always makes us a little clearer and more understandable, and we appreciate her very, very much. If you're enjoying these conversations, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It helps us get the word out and keeps our community growing. Remember, you can find People vs. Algorithms on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and now on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week. All right.
All right, guys.
We did this.
Thanks. Bye.